this particular playlist of videos, we're going to be looking at 1 hour revision for the AQA higher tier, and it's the specimen papers. Now if you go to the link below in the description, you'll be able to download this whole paper and have a go at it for yourself. And that's the general idea, that if you have a go at each of the questions, or stop the video, have a go at each of the questions, and then compare your solution with the one that I write out for you. I hope it's going to be useful for you. I'm going to aim for this video to be about 20 minutes to half an hour in length, and the idea is that will give you about an hour's worth of revision. Okay, so let's go on to question 1. All right, so with question 1, we've got this just a series of questions. Actually, the first couple of questions are just either kind of right or wrong answers. And it's the first one is circle the calculation that increases 400 by 7%. So the key issue with that is the word increase and 7%. So increase means that what we're going to do is take that 400 and we're going to increase it by 107%. 100% to actually keep the value, and then 7%, which is the additional part of it. So if I convert that to a decimal, it actually becomes 1.07. So it's 400 times 1.07. Okay, on to question 2, and we've got simplify 3 to the 4 times 3 to the 4. Well, the key area with this is you have to make sure that the two base numbers are the same, which they are, and then you add the indices together, so it's going to be 3 to the value of 8. Okay, hope those two have been absolutely fine for you. On to question 3. Now this is where it just gets a little bit trickier, because we've got these values of centimetres squared, and we're being asked to circle the area that's the same as 5.5 metres squared. Well, let's just look at that for a moment. A metre is the same as saying 100 centimetres. So that 100 centimetres multiplied together will actually give you 1 metre squared. Okay, well 100 times 100 means that 10,000 centimetres square is the same as 1 metre square. That's quite an important principle. You need to be very careful with these sorts of questions, because although they are usually only 1 point, it's worthwhile having that extra point if you can get it, and it might make a difference with your grade. Okay, so if we're going to convert this 1.1 metres squared to 5.5 meters squared, then we've multiplied that through by 5.5. Okay, so I'm going to do exactly the same with the other side. If I multiply that through by 5.5, what do I get? Well, it's going to be 55000 centimeters squared. So actually on this particular question, it's the third one on the list. Okay, hope that's been all right for you. Sometimes just it's useful to draw a little diagram just to make sure that you're converting properly. Okay, so let's have a look then at question 4. Now with question 4, it's only a 1 mark question, but it basically asks you to select which one of the graphs shows the line y equals 1 minus 2x. Okay, well the reason I've done it like that, that's not exactly in the right format. What it's better to do is to convert it to y equals minus 2x plus 1. Which is the general form. So the general form of a straight line is y equals mx plus c. Now what that tells you is plus c is where it crosses the y-axis. In this particular case, there's 1 there and there's 1 there. However, if you look at the 2 below, they're both minus 2. So I'm actually going to scrub those out. I'm not bothered about those 2 at all. It's going to be one of these. Now the easiest way perhaps is just to look at that and say, well, it's a negative gradient. Now a negative gradient goes this way round, so actually it's going to be line B that will be the correct graph. If it was line A, that would be a positive value of the gradient. Imagine it's like a little sort of tick, and that's a positive value. Okay, I hope that's been all right for you. Let's move on then to question 5, and in question 5 we've got a scatter graph. Okay, and every time I see a scatter graph, it probably makes sense to actually draw the line of best fit, even if you don't actually need it for any of the questions. Sometimes, and I think I've done this in previous videos, is that you look at a question and it just kind of asks you to do something almost without asking you to do something. And with this particular one, because it's a scatter graph, it just makes sense to draw in a line of best fit, because when we use scatter graphs, that's generally what we do. Now, you appreciate for the video that I've done that very quickly. Your line might be slightly different to mine, but all they're asking us to do is to work out the value of a 6-year-old car using a line of best fit. Well, there we go. Okay, so it's fairly easy to read from the graph that we've got 6 years across here, along to the top here, and across the hair. I'm going to go for £3,400. Okay, that's a little bit more than my car is worth, and my car is worth a lot older than 6 years. Okay, all right, so I hope that's been okay for you, and we'll move on to question number 6. Now, question number 6, we've got this slightly different type of question where we're being asked to kind of work out values. I think with these ones, really, the easiest way is to plug the value of W in, okay? So she's trying to work out the two values of W for which this is equal to 2. Now, she's saying that the two values that she's going to choose is when W equals 1 and when W equals -1, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug when W equals 1, and if I put that straight into the equation, what do I get? Well, I get 3 times 1. Now, if you see a dot with my working, it just basically means the same as multiplication. Okay, so 3 times 1 minus 1 cubed. Well, let's just look at that for a moment. Well, 3 times 1 is 3, minus 1 cubed, which is 1, because 1 times 1 times 1 is 1. So we've got 3 minus 1, which equals 2. So in this particular case, for the value of W when it's equal to 1, then this would be correct. So in this particular case, she is correct. Let's have a look at it when it's equal to -1. So when W equals -1. Now, the reason they're asking these sorts of questions is really just to test your ability to work with positive and negative numbers. So let's have a look at this. We've got 3 times -1 minus, now just be very careful here, it's -1 cubed. Okay, so let's just work that out. We've got 3 times -1, well, that's going to be -3. Okay, now -1 cubed is the same as saying -1 times -1 times -1. Well, that's still going to be -1. And then we've got minus -1, so it actually becomes -3 plus 1, okay? 2 minuses together are going to make a plus, okay? So in this particular case then we've got -3 plus 1, well, that's going to be equal to -2. So in this particular case, unfortunately, she's not correct using that value of -1, because that doesn't equal +2, it equals -2. Okay, hope that's all right and you've been able to follow that. As with a lot of these type of videos, it's sometimes better to have a look at some of the other types of questions, that are the very similar sort of questions to these, if you feel that you need to practice anything. If you have a look at my website or other people's websites, you're usually able to download and have a go at some of these questions for yourself. Okay, let's move on to working with fractions. Now, fractions appears to be becoming a lot more popular on some of these questions now, where what we do is we are asked to either multiply, divide or subtract sort of questions. In this particular case, they're mixed fractions and we're being asked to multiply them. Well, we're being asked to multiply mixed fractions, we need to convert them into improper fractions. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to say 2 times 4 is 8 plus 3 is 11. So that's 11 over 4 multiplied by 1 times 7 is 7, plus 5 is 12. That's going to be 12 over 7. All right, now there's a couple of ways you can cope with that. You can either multiply straight across and then divide by 4 times 7, which is 28. So you end up with a bit of an awkward kind of long division. What I tend to do personally, and if you have a look at some of my videos on fractions, it's usually sometimes it's a good idea to try to simplify the fractions. And what I can do here is I can divide through by 4. If I divide through by 4, I've got 4 divided by 4 is 1, and 12 divided by 4 is actually 3. Okay, so let's now multiply that through, and it just makes my calculation a little bit easier, as 33 over 7. Now it has asked me to leave my answer as a mixed number in its simplest form. Now this already is in its simplest form. It wouldn't have been had I multiplied everything through, then divided. Okay, so I've got 33 over 7. I'm going to divide that through, and 7 into 33 is 4 lots of 7 make 28. So I've got 4 wholes, and then I've got 5 over 7 left. Okay, so the answer to this particular question would be 4 and 5/7. Okay, I hope that's been all right for you and you'll be able to work with that. It is a useful idea just to have a go at some of the fractions, particularly some worksheets that you might be able to find. They are very, very useful indeed because they keep cropping up on these sorts of papers. Okay, let's have a look then at question number 8. Question number 8 is an inequality. It's not too bad really, relatively straightforward for 2 marks. If you pretty much treat it as a linear equation, then you should be able to work this through. In that what we want to do is find the value of x, or more accurately where x is greater than something. So I'm going to get that 3x and move it over here, so that's going to become then, take away 3x from both sides, that becomes 2x. And that's going to be minus 2 is greater than 11. And then I need to get that minus 2 over to the right hand side, so I'm going to add it, and I end up with 2x is greater than 13. Okay, and then I'm just going to divide by 2, and that's going to be x is greater than 13 over 2. And actually that's the answer. That's pretty much all you need. If you wanted, you could change that to a decimal, so you could write that is greater than 6.5 if you prefer. Doesn't really matter. Okay, so the first 8 questions in this particular paper have been relatively straightforward arithmetic type of questions, and they're sort of fairly low level questions. You either know them or you don't, and it seems to me that the rest of the paper then becomes much more tricky, and this is one of the questions where number 9, where I think you really have to just have an ability to kind of deal with these sorts of questions. It's a bit of a difficult question, but what they're basically saying is they want to work out 3 numbers that are within or between 20 and 40 so that they appear in these sequences, or the same number appears in both sequences. So I don't know, I think with that it's going to be a little bit of trial and error, but you can be quite smart about it because there's certain numbers that wouldn't work in this. Mainly, you need to be careful that you actually use odd numbers, because you're going to end up minusing 1 and adding 1. Well, if you're going to divide through, you need to certainly make sure that's going to be an odd number. With this one, your choices are a little bit limited. Okay, what I mean by all of that is I'm going to write this out as a table and see if that's going to be okay for you. So we're going to say we'll start, if we like, with just 20. Okay, so I'd like to give you an example. What's going to happen to this number, or how is this number going to appear in the sequence if the answer is 20? Okay, well, if it's 2n plus 1 or 3n minus 1, let's look at 2n minus 1. What we're saying is for the number 20 to appear in this sequence, it has to have a place. In other words, it has to be a whole value of n. N is actually the place. They call it the term, but it's the place that it appears within the sequence. So it could be it's the 4th number or the 8th number or the 22nd number. So it has to be a whole number for this. So in order for that to work, let's have a look. Well, if 2n plus 1 equals 20, if I take 1 away, then I've got 2n equals 19. Well, 19 then divided by 2 means that it would be the 9.5 place, which doesn't work for me. So actually, I'm going to discount that one. Okay. Let's have a look then at the number 21. Okay, so as you can see, I'm going to just sort of start working through these numbers to see if I can get some idea and some sort of pattern with them. Well, if it was 21, 21 is a bit more promising for this sequence, because if I minus 1 away, I get 2n equals 20, and then I divide by 2, so n equals 10. So actually, in this sequence, the number 21 appears in the 10th place. So that's promising. We've now got to look at this sequence. Okay, so because I've got minus 1, I'm going to add 1. So I end up with 22 equals 3n. So divide through by 3 and I get n equals 22 over 3. So unfortunately, although it appears in this place, at number 10, it doesn't appear anywhere here because that's not a whole number. Okay, so what I'm doing now is I'm getting a little bit more used to the way these numbers look. So I'm gonna hit lucky on my next one, and I'm gonna say that I think it has to be a series of odd numbers. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip my next number, which is 22, and I'm going to jump straight to 23, and I'm going to see if I can get good at this. Okay, so let's have a look at that. So 23 minus 1 is 22, divided by 2 is 11. That's marvellous because that's actually on the 11th place on that sequence. So that looks promising. So let's have a look at this side then. So I've got add 1 becomes 24, divide through by 3. Well, that's great. That's 8. So excellent. I've actually got my first number in this particular sequence, number 23. That's brilliant. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some mental arithmetic, and I'm going to say, well, actually, if I choose 24, no, not going to use that. Let's choose 25. Well, 25 minus 1 is 24, divided by 2, that's fine, that'll work. 25, add 1 is 26, that won't divide by 3, so that's not going to work. So let's have a look then at 26. I'm going to discount that. 27 minus 1 is 26. Yep, that's okay. 27, add 1 is 28, divided by 3. That won't work. The next one is actually going to be 29. Okay, so just for the sake of the video, I'm having to do this fairly quickly, but really the only way to kind of work through this is just have that ability to kind of look at each of the terms and see if you can do a little bit of mental gymnastics and work your way through to making sure that 29 in this particular case occurs in both of the sequences. And actually the next one, and it took me a little while when I did this particular question myself, and there's quite a fair bit of working out, but it was all done mentally after a little while, and I ended up with the last one as 35, because 35 appears in the 17th place and the 12th place. So actually the three numbers for this particular question is 23, 29 and 35. So I think with this type of question what they've done is they've lulled you into a false sense of security with the first 8 questions, and the 9th question on this exam is well, it's going to take a little bit of time. So my best advice is if you don't get it straight away, don't worry about it, move on with the rest of the exam and then come back to this at some later point if you've got time towards the end. You should always attempt every single question. You never know, you might pick up a mark or two. Okay, so it's 20 minutes into the video. I'm going to do the last question, which will finish us fairly neatly at question 10. Now, question 10 is just really a little bit of arithmetic, but when you first look at it, you think, oh my goodness, that's going to be a little bit tricky. But actually, we are dealing with ratios, but what we're saying is that if we want to make this mixture of white paint and blue paint, we need to mix white to blue in the ratio of 3 to 2. So if we did that, what would we get? We'd get 5 litres of paint. Okay, we get 2 litres of blue, 3 litres of white, put them together in a bucket, mix them all up, and you've got 5 litres of paint. Okay, we don't want 5 litres, we want to work out 18 litres of the mixture. So actually we've got to say, well, we need to multiply that. I beg your pardon, we need to work out 18 litres, so we need to multiply that by 3.6. All right, so how did I go from 5 times 3.6 to 18? Well, 5 times 3 is 15. And then I need an extra 3 litres. Well, that's going to be 0.6. So probably the easiest way is just to show you, if I do that as a division, I can do 18 divided by 5. Okay, so 5 into 18 is 3. And then I've actually got 3 left over. 5 into 30 is 6. So actually, if I use an inverse method, then I can work out I need to multiply this lot by 3.6. Okay, so what I need to do first is work out the cost of 3 litres of white paint and 2 litres of blue paint, because they've only given us the cost per litre. Now, with a lot of these things, it's kind of easier to work in pence. And certainly when you're multiplying, you shouldn't really use a decimal point. So I'm going to convert this to 280 times 3. Okay, and this is going to be 350 times 2. Okay, well, that's fairly easy. That's going to be 700. And that one is going to be 0.48. Okay, so in other words, if I bought 3 litres of the white paint, it would be £8.40, and if I bought 2 litres of the blue paint, it's going to be £7. All right, so that gives us now the cost of the 5 litres of paint. Now I need to then multiply that, so that's going to be my 5 litre cost. I need to multiply that then by 3.6. So both these numbers are going to be multiplied by 3.6. So I'm just going to put a decimal point in there to remind me, but I'm still going to keep it as pennies because, as I mentioned before, when you're multiplying through by a decimal, you really want to lose the decimal point and put the decimal point in afterwards. Okay, so now this is a little bit of long multiplication. Now, I'm very aware that you might do this differently to me. You might partition the number, and that's perfectly fine. I haven't got any problem with that at all. Some people do partitioning extremely well. Some people prefer this kind of method, which I use and I've always used, but it doesn't really matter. Just the main thing is you need to be accurate with these kind of questions. They end up usually working out fairly well, but you need to be very careful each time that you keep the decimal point away. Make sure that you put it back in when you've finished, and show your working always in order to pick up as many marks as possible. These kind of questions, as you can see at the top, are 4 marks each. Okay, so they will allow a good few marks for working and showing you're working. Now, what I've done there, I've multiplied that through and I've put the decimal point back in afterwards. You'll notice that actually it's moved 3 places. The reason that is because it's going to be 1 place here and 2 places here. So that's 3 places in total. I've moved it 3 places in total. And again, 2 places here and 1 place here, so 3 places in total. Okay, so that's going to give me then, if I add that cost together, this is going to give me 18 litres of paint, £30.24 for the white and £25.20 for the blue. If I add those together, I get £55.44. So the total cost of my paint in this particular case is going to be £55.44. Okay, I hope you followed that all right. It's not too bad. I think you should just be able to work through the arithmetic and hopefully it'll be okay for you. That's 25 minutes into the video, so we've had about 8 questions where it's been relatively straightforward, and then question 9 and 10 where it's been a little bit more challenging. So I think we deserve a break at this point, so I'm going to stop the video. I hope you've been able to stop the video as you've worked through, have a go at them, compare your solutions with the ones that I've written out for you. Please do subscribe to the channel, have a look at some of the other videos in this playlist, and that will carry you on through the rest of the paper. If you're not sure about anything, always add a comment below, and I'll look forward to seeing you inside the next video.